We have become a slave to our luxuries, or at least this is what Thoreau would suggest. Every day our garments become more assimilated to ourselves, receiving the impress of the wearer's character until we hesitate to lay them aside. What does it mean to become owned by the possessions that we think belong to us? This is what we discuss today on our continued series on Walden here on Circle Theory.
That's what it's gotta be this time. Yeah. Sun starts to set and the motion rise.
Every day our garments become more assimilated to ourselves, receiving the impress of the wearer's character until we hesitate to lay them aside. He thinks that we have become individuals whose clothing almost owns us. Our identity is connected to it. He rails against this obsession with how we dress and how we interact with one another. We rather need to become new people rather than change the way we show ourselves to the world. And it's a critique that I think is probably rather relevant at the moment. He says, I beware of all enterprises that require new clothes and not rather a new wearer of clothes. If there is not a new man, how can the new clothes be made to fit? So what he's suggesting is that we need to change before we change the things around us. We must be willing to go out and alter ourselves, that superficial changes will not do us much good. Rather, we need to find ways to purge ourselves and go through almost a Campbellian hero's journey in which we may become renewed and become somebody different ourselves. With respect to the luxuries and comforts, the wisest have ever lived a more simple and meager life than the poor. The ancient philosophers, Chinese, Hindu, Persian, and Greek, were a class than which none has been poorer in outward riches, none so rich inward. And this is a trend we see when we look at some of the greatest thinkers and philosophers throughout time. They chose almost a life of poverty. From Jesus to Gandhi to Buddha, we see individuals who have pushed off ownership because they see the things that might own them. This is the path and life of Socrates as he gives up those things to find truth instead. We know not much about them. It is remarkable that we know so much of them as we do. The same is true of the modern reformers and benefactors of the human race. That those that can find meaning are often not known. And Thoreau really wasn't known in his lifetime either. His obituary was a rather small and short segment, and I think his funeral wasn't well attended. Rather, that those individuals who are finding this meaning are separated. They struggled to bring these ideas back to get the rest of society to engage with them. We did an entire video on this. Regardless, none can be an impartial or wise observer of the human life, but from the vantage ground of what we should call voluntary poverty. He suggests that those of us that give up the things outside of us might find greater truth instead, and that it's worth giving up those things that you think you need to be okay so you can find out who you really are. Of a life of luxury, the fruit is luxury. Whether in agriculture or commerce or in literature or art, there are nowadays professors of philosophy but not philosophers. We have become individuals that can engage with content but not create it, to understand ideas but to not think them. Thoreau is suggesting that we have lost our ability to increase our ideas and expand ourselves because we're too possessed by things that don't matter, that we have lost our ability to truly engage with the values of our life. If you have any enterprise before you, try it in your old clothes. All men want not something to do with, but something to do, or rather something to be. Perhaps we should never procure a new suit, however ragged or dirty the old one, until we have so conducted, so enterprised or sailed in some way that we feel like new men in the old. And that to retain it would be like keeping a new wine in old bottles. So here we really get an idea of what he means by being a slave to our luxuries. That we have used them to try to gain new ideas of ourselves without actually having to go through the work of changing. That we just try to change on the outside over and over again, never really being able to figure out who we are internally. We see this as those of us who work in the helping professions. We see this in those who struggle with gaining an identity, that struggle in finding their place and connecting, that those that feel removed, cast off, and misunderstood, and are constantly trying to find some outward fix when in all reality what we need to be okay is an internal solution, that we need to become renewed. that we must burn the things we thought we needed so we can find out who we truly are, that we must go on this quest. And this is where we pick up next week as we discuss the ritual of renewal here on Circle Theory. Thanks for watching this week's episode on Henry David Thoreau and his great work, Walden. I hope you enjoyed. If you did, please like, comment, and subscribe. Let us know what you learned today. We'd love to discuss it with you. And like always, see you next week as we continue our series. Catch you next time.